And if you want to make a smaller fox, I have a smaller fox here, and that's in a 1-inch Pom Pom Maker. And then we are going to be using construction paper. So I have a couple sheets of construction paper here, and that's going to be for our little ears and nose and eyes. And I'm using glue dots to attach those. And you can use any size glue dot that you want. If you don't have glue dots, you could use a glue as well. It's just going to take a lot longer for your glue to dry in the yarn. So once you glue on your ears and eyes, you can just set your fox aside and let it dry. Or if you use glue dots, then it will be dry immediately. And then lastly, we're going to be using some scissors and a marker. And our marker is just to draw and trace out our little ears and eyes that we want to cut out of paper. So it could be any color marker. And I think that's everything we're going to be using today. So I'm excited to get started here. I'm going to flip my camera around so you can see my hands, and we'll get going. Okay. So again, we're using this plastic Pom Pom Maker. And so sure you have yours at home. And the two different sides come out. And that is how we're going to wrap our yarn around these areas. And then this also comes apart in the middle. So to start, you're going to make sure that your two sides of your Pom Pom Maker are attached in the center. And then we're going to pull both sides out. And then I'm going to start with our yarn. And we're going to start with our white yarn first. And so this is, you can see on our little example fox here, we've got a little white face, and then the rest of our fox is primarily all orange. And so we're going to start with this portion first. And to do that, we're going to take our yarn. I'm going to hold it onto my pom-pom arm sticking out here, and I'm going to wrap it around both of these little arms. And then we're going to wrap it around and around. And we are going to cover about at least half of this, if not like 2/3, with white. And we're going to want to go around and around. And again, you can see on both sides, I'm going all the way around both arms of the plastic Pom Pom Maker. And depending on how thick and how fuzzy you want your pom-pom to be, will depend on how much yarn you use. So I like them to be nice and fluffy. As you can see here, got lots of really round. It doesn't look scraggly at all. It's really filled out with yarn. And so I like to make this portion then, as we're wrapping, really thick. So that means we're just going to layer it on until we almost can't fit any more on. And as we're getting started here, you guys can definitely put anything in the Q&A. Let me know if you have questions, if you need help with anything along the way. And if you don't have a Pom Pom Maker like this, you can use cardboard as well. So you can use a cardboard ring. That's an option as well. You could cut a ring, like a donut shape, out of cardboard, or you can even use a fork is another option. It would just be really small, but the goal is that you want to wrap all of your yarn around something that then you can tie around it before you, so that it holds it together. So I'm going to go through all the steps using the Pom Pom Maker, but you can use a cardboard ring as well. That's very similar. So you could cut two shapes of like a donut shapes out of cardboard, and then you would wrap your yarn around that. And that will be another option. And so see here, wrapping it around quite a bit, probably at least 100 times here. And as you can see, it's nice and thick. And that's probably about good for our white here. So I'm gonna do a couple more on this little edge. Okay. And then I'm just going to cut my white yarn. And I'm just going to kind of tuck my yarn into itself. And then we're going to wrap the rest of it with our orange yarn. So we're going to do the same thing And we're going to finish out this portion of our first side of our little pom-pom arms. And we're going to fold it on and wrap it around. And as you're wrapping it, you just want to make sure that you don't have any yarn on these little feet because we're going to cut through all of this. And then we're going to just try to make our thickness of the orange similar to the thickness of the white yarn. And so we're going to fill in this whole gap at the end here. Okay, so I'm holding on to my orange yarn here. And if you we're gonna keep wrapping the other side of our pom-pom maker with this strand of yarn. So we're gonna we don't have to cut this yet. But when we cut our white yarn, you can just trim it and tuck it in anywhere, or you can just leave it out as a little tail. You just wanna make sure it doesn't start to unravel. But we're gonna trim our pom-pom when we're done. So if it has a couple pieces kind of that are longer than others, we'll trim it at the end. Okay, so I'm gonna hold my yarn here, and then I'm going to close this portion of the pom-pom maker. So you can see I've got one side all filled in here. And then I'm just going to take my yarn over to the other side. And this is going to create, you can cut this piece here, and then we can start on the other side. So you can see here, once I close it in, I can just trim it right along the front and it will hold it in place. And then again, we're going to do the same thing on the other side, and you can start anywhere within this. You can mix it up. You can go really clean if you want to, but you can kind of go back and forth and layer it as you wrap it. So I'm holding on the tail of my yarn onto my pom-pom arm, and then I'm going to take my other hand and wrap it around and around. I like to wrap it over that tail first to make sure that it stays in place. And then we're just going to do the same thing we did with the first side and just wrap it all the way around. And you can practice using pom-pom makers and play around with the idea of how thick you want it to be, how many times you want to wrap around the pom-pom maker. That is totally up to you. And like I said, depending on how many times you wrap it around will depend on how thick and fluffy your pom-pom is. It also depends on how thick your yarn is. So I'm using a pretty traditional like thickness of yarn, but I also have an option here that's much thinner. So if I were using something that's much thinner, I'm probably going to need to wrap it around many more times. Or if you're using really thick, chunky yarn, then you might need to wrap it around only a couple of times. But ultimately, as you wrap it around and you push this portion back into the pom-pom maker, you want it to feel snug. And so that that the arms are totally full of yarn. And I know a couple of people mentioned that they don't have this tool that was on the supply list. And there are a lot of ways to make pom-poms. I'm going to go through all the steps using the pom-pom maker. And if we have some time, then we can see if we can create one out of construction paper that I have on hand here. And I can show you another method. All right, so again, we're just going to wrap around and around, making this thick and even all the way across. All right, just doing a couple more rounds here. Making pom-poms is not really complicated once you learn these steps, because as you can see, we're just doing the same thing over and over again, wrapping our yarn, making it nice and chunky. but it is a little time consuming. Okay, so I'm just gonna see this here, looks about right. So I'm gonna push my yarn, my arm back down. So now your Pom Pom Maker should look like this. So our top portion here is mostly white with a little bit of orange, and then the bottom portion is all orange. All right. And then I'm going to cut off a spare piece of yarn here. And this we're going to use to tie around all of the yarn to keep all of this intact, and that will create the pom-pom itself. So you don't need a big piece. I cut off about 1 foot, but you probably only need about 6 inches, but sometimes it's nice to have a little extra. You can easily grab it and make a nice knot. Okay, so what we're going to do next is cut down the middle. And so that's what's cool about these pom-pom makers, is that there's a gap right in the middle of this that we've wrapped around. And so you're going to put your scissors in the edge of this gap here, and you're going to cut up along all the edges, right through the center. And I'm kind of holding down this other side here with my finger just to keep it so I don't open it and all my yarn comes out. And yarn can be sometimes hard to cut. So depending on what scissors you're using, you can do it in a few different layers. You don't have to cut the whole thing at once. So as you can see, I'm kind of just doing little snips and starting to cut away at all of my yarn. So you can see I'm kind of putting the tip of my scissor into just the first layer or two of the yarn, and then I can go back in under the next layer. As you get closer to this edge and where you're holding on, now that we've cut through, you can hold this portion down. And the goal is that, so we haven't tied all this together yet, that right now, if you were to open your pom-pom arms, all of this yarn that you just spent so much time wrapping and trimming could come out. So we want to make sure that we're putting a little bit of pressure on our pom-pom maker and holding it together. Okay, so there is our first side. You see we've cut all the way through. And now we're going to do the same thing to the other side. And again, don't feel like you have to cut through all of the yarn in one movement. It's a lot of material to cut through. So you can just do it in little portions at a time. So we're almost done cutting. And as you finish cutting through your yarn on your pom-pom maker, again, make sure you're holding it together. You don't want to open it yet. All your yarn will fall out. Okay, so now I've cut through all of my yarn, I'm holding this together still. Everything's still attached to my pom-pom maker. And that little piece of yarn that we just cut off, I'm going to now push into the gap and pull it all the way around and then tie it together. So I'll do that again for you here. So once you've cut all the way through, I'm going to take my yarn. It doesn't matter which side you do this on, either top or bottom. And I'm going to push my excess piece of yarn into the center of the gap that we just cut our scissors through and pull it around to the other side. And then we're going to tie a knot. So go ahead and do a little crisscross, pull one side under, and then you're going to pull it tight. And we're going to do the same thing again. I'm going to do a double knot. So cross them over, pull one side under, and knot it again. And now you can open up your Pom Pom Maker. And this is where we're going to take the center apart. And there we have, right now, what looks like just a funky little pom-pom. But slowly it will become a fox. Okay, so we've created the base of our little fox head here. You can start to see we've got our orange face here, the little white muzzle portion of their mouth. And so you can leave these longer tails on if you want to. If you want to hang your pom-pom, you could leave these on and tie a knot at the top. But I'm going to trim mine off, and I'm just going to let my fox be a little sitter. It can just sit on a shelf. And so next, we are going to want to shape our pom-pom into more of a fox-like shape. And to do that, we're going to trim all this excess off. Anything that looks a little uneven, we can trim it and just make it even. And then we're going to create a little bit of a triangular shape right in the front of this little fox face. So first, I'm just going to take my scissors and I'm just going to slowly trim all the way around this pom-pom. Any little ones that are sticking out that aren't even, we'll just do a quick little haircut. And again, this is just to even out the whole thing. It's totally optional as well. If you like the way yours came right out of your Pom Pom Maker, then perfection. You don't have to trim anything. So I always like to even up my little pom-pom hair here. Okay, so now that we have kind of trimmed this up to make it look pretty much perfectly round, what we're going to do is look at the front of your pom-pom here where the orange meets the white, and we're going to shape it into a fox face. So I'm going to kind of pull a portion into the center, and see I'm kind of creating a little nose shape here. You can see I've almost created two little divots on either side. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut away into those little divots. I'm not cutting all the way down. We're just going to cut it away a little bit to make this side shorter, and it will make this portion longer, and that will create a little bit of a nose-like shape. So you can see here, just cutting in a little bit. Again, you can kind of see here, start of our little fox face. Cutting away at both sides. Again, when you're looking at a little animal face, their nose kind of sticks out further, and then the sides and their eyes are further back. So we're going to cut away into the white and orange on both sides. And then I'm going to trim down more and more of my white to make it a little bit tighter and less fluffy. Still is full, so it still has fluffiness to it, but doesn't stick out quite as much. That just gives it kind of carving into our yarn. Okay, so looking at our little start of our fox here, I'm going to cut this down a little bit more on this side. And I'm being careful to make sure that I'm still leaving a wider portion So from the side, you can start to see a little bit here. It's shorter and kind of curves out into a point here on both sides. So looking down from the top, you can see it kind of curves in that I've cut away, kind of using my scissors, carved in here, leaving a point in the center, and then carved in on this side as well. Okay. And from there, we're going to add on our cute little decorations using construction paper, and that's going to further define our fox. And so this is the start of our little pom-pom face. And we're going to move on to our construction paper. And we're going to start with our orange construction paper first. And to make our little fox ears here, they're in 3 layers. So I've got a fuzzy, sort of like jagged edge piece of black first on the back. And that is to kind of mimic the little furry, fuzzy ears of a fox. And then we've got our orange, bigger base in the center, and then a small little white triangle in there to be the inside of their little ears. So we're going to start with the orange layer first, because we want to make sure that everything we build around the orange, whether we're adding the black little furry elements, are going to be bigger than the orange, and we want to make sure that the white pieces are smaller than the orange. So I'm going to just kind of draw 2 triangles. I'm going to start by kind of drawing a curved line, and I'm going to do the same line going back down. So kind of curved little triangle. And we're going to do 2 of those. And I see Letty in the Q&A mentioning trying to purchase some of the materials for today and maybe having a little bit of issue adding into the cart. I don't have a great solution for you in the moment, Letty, but I think that Rich and the team can follow up and hopefully get that figured out for you. Okay.
Sure thing. We'll take a look.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rich. And so now I'm just going to cut along my line here. And we're going to cut out our little orange ears. And so there we have 2 different little orange triangles here. And from there, we're going to cut out our little fuzzy black element that goes behind the ear. And this piece, we want to do in kind of little jagged edges to mimic the idea of little like fuzzy furry ears. And it's hard to see as I'm drawing on black paper. So I can even draw it on the white paper for you, and then you could do this on black. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down my orange piece first to make sure that it fits around it. And then I'm going to draw little like spikes almost. I'm drawing this a little bit bigger than maybe I want the piece to be so that I can cut on the inside of the line and you won't see that. So again, we're just going to hold down my orange ear, and then I'm just going to kind of freehand draw kind of a little line and then a little point. And they're not perfect. It's the fun thing about little animals and fur is that it could go any which way. All right, so I do this on the white so you could see what this looks like, but I'm going to do it quickly on my black. In person, you can see the black marker on the black paper, but in the camera, I don't think it's going to show up much. But I'm going to do the same exact thing. And adding this little layer is also optional. If you want to just do little orange triangle ears, that is super cute as well. So you don't have to add multiple layers if you don't want to. So you can kind of barely, depending on how the light hits it, you can kind of see on my black paper here, the black ink. So now I'm just going to cut along the line that I just drew. I'm just cutting like kind of barely little points here. So now you can see we can layer these together here. And this base at the bottom here, that's going to be shoved into the pom-pom with a glue dot, so you won't see that. And so you can kind of play with where you want it to land. And of course, I just drew out these shapes. You can also freehand cut it if you want to. All right, so I'm going to use a little glue dot to glue these together first. And if you haven't used glue dots before, and this is your first time using them, they are going to be your new best crafting friend. As you can see on this little strip of paper, there's these tiny little dots that are kind of slightly shiny, and that's the actual little glue dots. I'm going to take my orange paper, I'm going to stick it directly on to the individual little dots. You can see a little shiny dots there. And then I'm going to place it on top of my black paper. And I wanted to get the tip of my little triangle up close to the tip of the black triangle. And I'm just going to cut this down a little bit. Again, this bottom portion here, that's all going to be hidden inside the pom-pom, so you won't see that once we're done. I'm just going to trim off a little bit on the side of my little ear. It felt a little bit wide on one side. And so you can do that too, even as you draw it out. If you feel like your is a little bit too big, anything of that sort, you can always trim it up a little bit now. Okay, lastly, we're going to now use our white construction paper, and we are going to draw a similar little triangle to go inside of the ear. And so I'm just going to look at my triangle here, and I'm just going to draw a smaller version of it, like we did at the first one. And when you're using like a bigger sheet of paper, construction paper, I always like to cut out the small element that I'm actually using, and you don't have to fight with that extra bit of paper. All right, and then I'm just going to cut right inside the line. You can also flip your paper over if you have any little marker showing. And there we have our little layered ears. So again, we're going to use more glue dots. Stick these on. And there's our adorable little fox ears. And then what I like to do with these is once they're all glued together, and you could also use like regular craft glue or even a glue stick for the paper portions to glue together. So once it's dry, or if you're using glue dots like I am, you can do it immediately. I like to kind of bend it around my fingers. So you can see I'm just kind of like barely bending it. I'm not folding it and creating a harsh crease in the center. I'm just kind of bending the paper a little bit. And so you just get a little bit of a curve and just looks a little bit more realistic of a little ear. And I'm just kind of holding it between my fingers and then just kind of pushing up from the bottom to curve it around my pointer fingers. Okay, so we've got these two little elements. Next, we're going to cut out our eyes and our nose. And we're going to use our black construction paper again. And I'm just going to cut off a smaller piece. You can draw your circles for your eyes if you want. You could also use googly eyes if you wanted to instead. But I'm just going to use our little construction paper. And I'm just going to freehand cut out two little circles. So I like to kind of start with curving around the paper, making a little circle, and then you can trim it down a little bit more if you need to. You can again also draw a circle first if you want to. There we have one little circular eye, and then we're going to do the same thing again. And as I'm cutting, you can see I'm kind of pushing the paper through my scissors and turning the paper more than I'm turning my scissors. And then you can trim it down and even out your circle. And one's still just a little bit bigger. Just gonna trim it down a little bit more as I go here. Okay, so now we've got two little ears and two little eyes. And next we're gonna do a little nose. And for mine, I like to do a little heart nose because I think that that is so cute. But you can also just cut out a little triangle or another little circle if you want to. But to do a little heart, what I think is sometimes the easiest thing to do, I'm going to cut off a smaller piece of paper, about less than an inch. I'm going to fold it in half. And then I'm going to cut out one side of a heart. I'm going to cut a little triangle. Start to cut a little triangle and then curve it down. To create a little heart. So again, if you have a little small piece of paper, I'm going to fold that in half. And then where the crease is going to be the center of your heart. So you're going to cut a little curve and then curve it down. Okay. There we've got our little nose, our eyes, and two little ears. And so we're going to grab our glue dots again here. And there's also lots of different sizes of glue dots. So these are the little like mini ones. They're only 3/16 of an inch. I also have the larger 1/2 inch ones. You can use those as well. They might be a little bit big for some of our pieces, but you can kind of fold them in half. Okay, so I'm going to take glue dots. I'm going to put a couple of glue dots on the front and the back. And so the tip of our ear is going to be at the top and at the top of our little pom-pom head. So this flat portion is what's going to go inside. So I'm going to put two glue dots on the back on either corner and then two on the front. And because our pom-poms aren't flat, they're a three-dimensional object, we want the yarn to grab it on both the front and back. So now I'm kind of looking at our little fox face here. here's where our little nose and eyes are that we're about to add in. And so I'm just gonna look at where I want my ear to be. I'm gonna kind of push it into my yarn, and then I'm just gonna squeeze it on. And that just secures your little ear. Okay, we're gonna do the same thing now on the other side. So again, I'm looking, holding my pom-pom head here, and I'm looking at the little face of where it's gonna go, and I'm gonna line my ear up on the opposite side, and then just kind of squeeze that yarn so that the glue dots stick. And now we can attach our little face. I'm gonna take my little heart nose and put a couple glue dots on the back. And I like to use a couple of glue dots when you're working with yarn and fabric and any sort of like textile material. Glue doesn't always work that well, even glue dots. So having more surface covered with our little glue dots gives it more areas to grab onto. And so right here where our little point is, we've cut away our little face here. I'm going to put my little nose right on the tip of where my white and my orange meets. And I'm just going to kind of grab from behind that longer bit of yarn and squeeze it on. Starting to look like a fox. And next we're going to add our eyes. And right in this little curve of where we cut away and made a short little yarn there. And do the other little eye. I'm doing them right above the white portion in the orange. And there you have your own little pom-pom fox. You can see it's all fluffy all the way around. We've got our cute little white muzzle looking awfully adorable. And you can make this in as many colors as you want. And now that you have learned how to make your own little fox, you could definitely turn this into any animal as well. You could do different color yarn and make similar creatures like a raccoon or a cat. And you can do some fun little elements using construction paper or felt like we did today. So I'm so glad that you guys all joined us. And I hope that you had just as much fun as I did crafting your own little foxes. And I hope that you join us again. Thank you so much and have a great day.